have any questions that you have on hand, write them in the chat box, and we'll try to address them at a little bit of 15 minutes after the hour. But now that we have a good number of people to start with, I want to introduce our esteemed panelists. This topic is Crisis Management in 2020. We welcome Sydney Sloan, who's the CMO of SalesLoft, Trey Allison, co-founder and CEO of Chronologic, Brian Vitale, VP Sales Development at ZoomInfo, and William Tyree, CMO at Ring DNA. Without further ado, I'd like to turn it on to our panelists.
Great. Well, thanks everybody for being here. Certainly exciting times. I think, we have 20 minutes. We'd love to encourage everybody from the panel to go ahead and fire questions in. We would love to hear from you, and we'll devote a section of our time together to answering as many as we can. So Sydney, let's start with you.
Oh, and I'm sorry, William, I forgot one of my main goals is to remind everybody that this is recording. This is a recorded session, and if anybody doesn't want to have their face on the recording, just to make sure that their camera is off. Sorry about that, William.
No worries. All right. So Sydney, we're all selling through a time when economic forecasts are changing constantly. I know at SalesLoft, you've done a lot of research that resulted in very specific recommendations for sales teams. Would you like to just tell us about those?
Sure. So basically, gosh, it feels like so long ago now, in the middle of March when everything was going down. We started our research right away in terms of what messages were resonating versus not from our own for our own teams, as well as across the platform we were looking into. And there were three things that kind of stood out, which we're making recommendations for. The first, if you haven't yet already done so, which I'm sure you have, it's to go back and revisit your messaging and your value propositions to make sure that they are aligned with the new challenges that your customers might be facing, and give them insight into how you can help in the world that they're faced. The second thing, and this was surprising actually, was very quickly, people were tired of the COVID message. So we found that if you put COVID in your title or first line, that the response rates were 40% lower than not mentioning it at all. And as that's evolved, I think that everybody has come to the point of realizing, hey, this is a new world. You have to be empathetic. You have to lead with empathy, and personalization matters now more than ever. So it's not about volume. The third thing that we found is that people are sending more emails than ever. So trying to break through is hard. So you really do have to be specific, take the extra time to do your research and make the personalization stand out, and use multiple channels. So just sending email, if you send email and actually calling. I saw a thing on LinkedIn the other day saying, we're actually calling again and it's working. And it's like, yes, exactly. You need to use all the channels that you have at your disposal to break through.
That's great. Yeah, super interesting. I couldn't agree more on the personalization. On voice calls, we have some research that came out last week where we're seeing that, like you, mentioning COVID is not necessarily helpful. There's no correlation between success and that of calls, but successful SDR calls resulting in a meeting are about a minute longer than they were before March. And it's very consistent across the board. So it seems like there's a little bit of extra relationship building happening right now, around this shared experience. Brian, congrats on your IPO over there as a newly public company. What's been working, and what have you been talking to your sales team about changing during this time?
Yeah, to Sydney's point, not mentioning it is the way to go. But when someone wants to talk about it, be a human. You mentioned calls are about a minute longer. We start off every day by listening to a call, all 140 SDRs here at ZoomInfo, and you're seeing that a lot. So you're sort of going into the call with the normal pitch, why you're calling, the value prop, and then if they want to talk about COVID or how that's affected them or their experience with it, we have seen that when you go into that a little bit with the person and you build that relationship, it leads to a much better outcome and typically a meeting schedule. Other than that, in the environment now, we've got, again, 140 SDRs remote. So what we did from the get-go is we knew that with that loss of sort of visibility of here out on the sales floor, we wanted to make sure that we maintained activity levels. And we've actually made more dials since being home than we were in the office. And that was just a way where we were able to maintain the activity and performance that we were looking for.
Got it. And you mentioned you have about 120 SDRs remote. What percentage of those were remote prior to March or April?
Zero.
So that's a big adjustment for your team. Wow.
It was.
Wow. Trey, what about you? For your team personally, has there been a big adjustment in moving remote, and how have you addressed that from a management perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. There was, our policy hasn't changed. We've always had a work from wherever policy. Just how people are using that policy definitely has changed. I'm actually in the office today. A few of us come in here and there, but we try to keep the density pretty low, probably 10% at most. So working from home has definitely been a challenge. The calendar has become everything, even more so than it already had been for knowledge workers. And we gave up the Zoom happy hours pretty quickly. I think I forgot who was the first to come out and say, like, hey, does anyone else just hate Zoom happy hours? And but not to say we don't have happy hours. They're just less scripted and less stiff, and more like, hey, it's Friday at the end of the day and I have a call. You want to have a beer with me?
There you go. There you go. So more like real life, in other words. It sounds like more organic.
Yeah. That's good. Well put.
That's great. So, Sydney, there's a lot of talk about needing to over communicate right now with our teams. And, I think a big reason for that is that as people are looking at their target accounts, they're looking again at the adjustments in messaging and even value that they're offering right now. There's a big need to stay on the same page. What kind of changes to management communication style or management cadence, if you will, have changed over the last 2 or 3 months?
We talk about, in order for people to hear the message, you have to say it 7 times, 7 ways. And so over communication, you actually, I don't know if it's possible to over communicate. And so we had some great communication practices in place before. The whole company does a daily stand-up, so that hasn't changed. We still do it. We actually just made it a little bit longer. We're back now to our 15 minutes. We do we did a bi-weekly all hands, which was an hour, and there's 10 minutes to ask me anything. And believe me, our teams ask us anything. We've added another one called a quick hands. I'm actually missing it today, and I'm sad because it's always super interesting. But happy to be here with you. I think the other thing that's been the most important lesson for me personally and my team and what I've been sharing is people are all experiencing this differently. And rapid change, however you plan for it, and the idea of the change curve, you're not going to be on the same page. You can't assume that they are feeling the same way that you do. So taking the time to do one-on-ones, if you could do it with everybody, that's fantastic. If not, at least do it with your high potentials. And simply asking them the question, how are they doing? Letting them speak, listen. I had a manager the other day, we were talking about his team, and it was like, ask them to rate how they're doing on a scale of 1 to 10. And it was just fascinating to see how people were ranking, how they were feeling, how much of it was external, how much of it was work, and the variation amongst the team. And so you've got to meet them where they are, and you have to understand all the things that are going on in their lives to help them get through this. So it takes time, but you have to do it.
I absolutely love that multi-channel approach to the team communication. Kind of on the rating, that really resonates with me. We actually have some HR software that we use that sends each team member a survey every week and asks them to rate how they're feeling that week, as well as a few other things. And that's been, I think it would be helpful, anytime, but it's especially been helpful right now. Brian, Trey, how are things changing for you?
Yeah, I'll start. The daily stand-up is something that we introduced since being remote. We do one on the East Coast, one on the West Coast to, make sure we're appealing to all employees on when they start their day. On the SDR side, we listen to one call every morning. It sort of gives, if you show up every day as an SDR leader and you say, activity and dials and meeting scheduled, and you just walk down the funnel. So what we do is we listen to a call every day, and that sort of opens up the dialogue for something different each day. And we can listen to inbound, we can listen to outbound, we can listen to a call to our customer base. So that's been a really nice touch of doing that every day. And then also just the one really nice thing to make sure that the management team's all, you would think, right? Like at the end of each day, your management team is all aligned. But what we started doing is, since we've been remote, we have the managers meet every single day around 5:30 Eastern, just to come together, and we just go over the day. What were we hearing? What were some of the pros? What were some of the cons? And so those two meetings alone have made sort of everything just come together each day. And, like human beings in general, at least from my experience, everyone says they want this like completely free, let me do what I want. I can do the art of SDRs and all that. But like what I've seen more and more is like actually we crave like rhythm and ritual, right? Like we crave to know like what am I expecting each morning when I wake up? And so to be completely honest, like I host 2 calls every single day since I've been remote. Like, do I personally want to say the exact same thing every single day, the 2 different giant buckets? No, of course not. But, it's really been a strong practice where everyone from Waltham, Massachusetts to Vancouver, Washington, we're all on the same page on the SDR individual level standpoint. And then the managers, by the end of the day, we sort of bring that all together. So, I think as a leader, and especially through crises, like you have to do what's best for your employees. It's not just about me saying the same thing again and like feeling repetitive. Like who cares? Like it's the best for your team. So that's how I feel about the change.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I completely agree, Brian. The rhythm piece is a big deal, and we underestimate how much going to the office provides rhythm in just the nature of going to the office, going to a different environment. So like you guys, we've implemented stand-ups all across the country, at the company. We stole it from engineering, and I bet it sticks around. It's been remarkably helpful and in providing transparency, which is something else that I think is incredibly important, is being transparent with everybody, being very open and honest. They know we're not privy to any information that they aren't about the macro situation. I mean, we all have the same news, and so it's being, I guess, vulnerable and transparent, and being willing to shift and be a person to your people is incredibly important during times like this.
Yeah, absolutely. I can relate to stepping up all the, all the stand-ups as well. On our team, we had 4 a week, stepped those up to 5 a week. And we have more all hands meetings as well. And then even if the executive management level, we kind of went from about 1 hour a week to about 4 hours a week on average now. It's just really important to get everybody on the same page, because you don't realize how important those inter-office communications are to harmonizing your team. So,
William, one thing to add on the stand-ups, I think, because as I said, we've been doing that for a while, so I've been doing it for a couple of years now. And as you continue to evolve and using the stand-up format, you may want to explore different variations. So my team got tired of just reading our calendars to each other.
Yep.
And so like on Mondays, we say, here's my goals for the week. On Tuesday topic day. So if somebody wants to use that time in the morning to discuss a topic, we deep dive. Then Wednesday is kind of a normal run. And then Thursday, same thing, normal. And then Friday we do a wrap up. So we were kind of like, are we getting all the value out of this time together by just reading our calendars, or should we use it to also talk about stuff? So just a seed for thought as people are implementing stand up.
I love that. That's great. I'm going to go ahead and deploy a quick survey to people. So, when we were talking about this session, we're really interested in hearing from other people out there. What activities have been most effective at keeping your teams engaged and motivated? Because, we did a survey at Ring DNA last week with about 1,000 people. And a lot of folks, I'd say 20%, if the memory serves, think that they're not going back to the office until 2021. About 22% believed that they were not going to be back in the office ever in the capacity that was before. So there's a lot of uncertainty about that. So, how do you really factor that in as we're looking at those results come in? Catherine, do we have questions from the audience that we can feed our panel? Hey, Catherine, you're on mute, I think.
There we go. Hi. We don't have any. This is a great time to solicit questions. At this time, we have comments. Certainly, Hadley Kushner mentioned that over communication and making sure SBR days have structure. But no questions yet. So this is a great time to ask for questions.
Okay, that's great. Well, while we're waiting for that, here's a question for the panel. What thing about teams working remotely has really, been clear to you that you wish people would talk about more? For example, let me give you one example, is a lot of people around Ring have observed that they really feel like they are as productive, if not more productive, remote, right? Which raises questions about, the future of work and what that should be. So what do you feel like is kind of like unwritten yet, or should shed a light on?
Yeah, I have something, if you don't mind. I think
Sure.
the unwritten piece, and we've been doing it for just under 4 months, but I think there will be an effect long term on the energy and actually being with other human beings. Like the unwritten piece is like, will there be something to like help bridge that gap? Because I think any human being, like, yeah, we're as effective, right? Like we're continuing to do things. We're all still here. We're running this panel virtual, but isn't it just a different feeling than actually being with other humans? And I think like the unwritten piece is just not knowing what that's going to lead to in the future. And like, is there going to be some way to bridge that gap? I don't know how you would. Maybe it's holographs. I've got no clue, but like, that's the piece that I think is like still unknown. It's like performance for 4 months is one thing. Keeping that performance and feeling good for 3 years is a different thing, in my opinion.
I'll riff off that, Brian. And one of the things when we do a quarterly Amplify, it's the product we use to do a pulse on the company. And one thing that we found very quickly was the people's need for rest. And, they're on 24/7. They've taken on additional responsibilities, being teachers and, full-time cooks and all these other things. And because they're in their house without somewhere to go, people aren't taking breaks. And so the things that we've talked about, having natural ends to the day and making sure people do log off as leaders, you also have to stop. We can't continue to email at 10:30 at night and expect our people to actually take that rest. And the importance of like coaching your teams on how to unplug and recharge, and taking a week off. It's actually okay. We've given rest days. So we have like 8 rest days. We went on the Google trend. I think they were the first to do it, and giving the Friday before the long weekend. And we've given every other Friday for the summer off. But for a lot of people, that's not enough just to have a Friday off. They would have taken vacation before, and now people aren't thinking they can, or why should I if I'm home anyway? And I think we're going to see more burnout if we don't allow our teams to do that.
Absolutely. Hey, Catherine, you're muted.
That always happens. Sorry about that. We have 2 questions. One is, what strategies are you employing to welcome new hires as they begin to your company, to introduce them to company culture while remaining remote? Are all hands and stand-ups sufficing? And while you're thinking about that question, there's a second question. How do you manage the balance between valuable communication and over communication with your teams while working remote?
Trey, it looked like you're going to take the first one.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about, we just hired a few new engineers, and one of the things that happened by accident, but we've kind of made it a thing, is we open a Zoom and we don't make it about anything. We just sit with each other and work and listen to people type on the keyboard, and you just kind of do a ride along, and you hang out with that person all day long, or not all day, but a few hours. And it's much more organic, and a lot of the sides of people that come out when you're in the office with them will come out in that more relaxed sort of call, as opposed to a structured 30-minute onboarding session or whatever it is. And Sydney, I really like your point about, you got to be careful about emailing people in the middle of the night or slacking them in the middle of the night. Pre-COVID, I used to do that all the time, because there was this sort of unwritten rule of if somebody slacks you in the middle of the night, you don't have to get to it. It's crazy. Get to it in the morning. Now I've noticed that if I slack somebody in the middle of the night, they'll respond to me. And it's like, I've actually got, like, I'll email myself a thing that I need to slack somebody in the morning, because you got to be respectful of people's need to recharge. Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that.
We gave a Wednesday off, which was fun. I recommend giving a Wednesday off. It was controversial. Everyone was like, what the, give a Monday or a Friday, make it a long weekend. But we gave a Wednesday off, and it was super cool. You just like, you're like, oh, I don't go to work tomorrow. That's cool. And then, it's really nice. So Wednesday is a great day to give off. So I say implement that.
It's fantastic. Awesome. Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly on Slack, text, leading by example that way. I've even gone a little bit more extreme and started scheduling some of my emails to show up at like 6 or 7 in the morning, as opposed to like sending them at 9 or 10 at night, just to try to set expectation. I think it's a really good point.
Mute. Catherine, you're muted.
I think she's telling us the session is over.
Yeah.
But we're at time. Well, this has been a fantastic session, everyone. I learned a lot. I think this has been terrific. And Catherine, if you come off mute.
There we go. I'm sorry about that.
That's okay.
We missed one question.
Okay.
And that is, how do you handle structure for sales team now that we're all working from home? You could either answer this question now, or you could continue the discussion during LinkedIn as part of LinkedIn discussions or follow-up discussions. Totally up to you.
I think Brian touched on it. It's still, people want rituals and activities and those kinds of things. There was kind of an answer in that.
Yeah. Great.
Okay, we're good.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks all. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, bye.
Thanks, guys.